Marc-Vivien Foé. Confederations Cup, Cameroon versus Colombia, the 72nd minute. No foul, no contact, just a sudden collapse in the centre circle. Marc-Vivien Foé, 28, fell to the ground in front of millions watching live. Foé, the tireless midfielder who had starred for West Ham, Manchester City, Lyon and Cameroon, was known for his relentless energy. At the Stade de Gerland, he was doing what he always did, covering every blade of grass, when, without warning, he went down. Players and officials knew instantly this was different. His stillness, the way he had fallen, it was frightening. Medics rushed on as teammates formed a circle around him. Marc-Vivien Foé died on the pitch he loved. His passing forced football to change. Defibrillators became mandatory, medical checks grew stricter, and the sport could no longer ignore the risks hidden behind athletic strength. Emiliano Sala. Cardiff City's record signing, £15 million, a Premier League dream nearly within reach. But the plane carrying Sala over the English Channel should never have been in the air. The pilot wasn't qualified for commercial flights. The aircraft wasn't certified for passenger service. But in the rush to complete the transfer, these details were overlooked. Somewhere over the channel, the plane disappeared from radar. When the wreckage was found, Sala's body was recovered. The pilot never was. The investigation revealed a web of shadowy dealings, agents cutting corners, regulations ignored, a system that treated players like assets rather than people. Cardiff and Nantes would spend years fighting over the transfer fee while the player who had worked his entire life for this opportunity was gone. Davide Astori. Fiorentina captain, Italy international, a leader on and off the pitch. On the morning of a Serie A match, teammates knocked on his hotel room door. Inside, there was only silence. Davide Astori had died in his sleep at just 31, the victim of sudden cardiac arrest. The reaction was unlike anything Italian football had seen. Serie A postponed every match that weekend, but it was his funeral that revealed the depth of his impact. The Basilica of Santa Croce in Florence became a temple of respect and grief. Juventus stars, AC Milan legends, Roma icons, players from rival clubs who rarely shared anything, stood side by side to honour him. The league froze. Tribes set aside their colours. His number 13 shirt was retired by both Fiorentina and Cagliari. For once, football wasn't about victories or rivalries. It was about loss, respect, and unity. A story left behind a reminder: greatness isn't measured in headlines or trophies, but in how deeply people feel your absence. Puerta. Antonio Puerta was more than a rising talent for Sevilla. He was the heart of their future. Just 22 years old, he collapsed during a league match against Getafe. At first, it seemed like he would recover. He even walked off the pitch. But in the dressing room, cardiac arrest struck repeatedly. For 3 agonizing days, he fought to stay alive. On August 28, 2007, Spain lost one of its brightest hopes. The shock was overwhelming. Teammates, supporters, and an entire city were left asking how football could go on without him. Yet Sevilla found their answer not in silence, but in remembrance. That season, when Sevilla lifted the UEFA Cup, it was more than silverware. It was a symbol of resilience, of grief transformed into strength, of a promise kept to a teammate taken too soon. Puerta's left foot had once brought Sevilla triumph. His memory ensured they would triumph again. Cheick Tioté. Newcastle, Arsenal, 2011. Down 4-0, Newcastle clawed back to 4-3. Then one strike from Cheick Tioté detonates St James's Park. Final whistle, 4-4. A Premier League classic. He only ever scored that one league goal. The Ivorian defensive midfielder struck the ball 25 yards out, and it flew past a despairing Manuel Almunia into the Arsenal net. The noise was deafening. Arsenal 4, Newcastle 4. One of the greatest comebacks in Premier League history, sealed by a player who would never score again. 6 years later, in training with Beijing Enterprises, Tioté suddenly collapsed. At just 30 years old, the heart that had driven him through a career of endless energy and fearless tackles simply stopped. Football had lost another warrior far too soon. Tioté's career was built on grit, on interceptions, on breaking play. Yet it was that single strike, a goal born of timing, courage, and pure instinct, that immortalised him. Diogo Jota, Liverpool's number 20, a newlywed, a father of 3, a player Klopp trusted, fans adored. On July 3rd, driving in Spain with his brother André, a tyre blew out. Their Lamborghini went up in flames, both gone instantly. At 28, the Portuguese forward was at the peak of his powers. His work rate, his finishing ability, his understanding with teammates had made him integral to Liverpool's success. Fans had created songs that echoed around Anfield, celebrating a player who gave everything. The tyre blowout happened without warning. At high speed, control was lost instantly. The car caught fire after impact. Both brothers died immediately, robbing Portuguese football of one of its brightest stars. Liverpool retired number 20. Portugal carried his name onto every pitch. Klopp's words cut deepest. Diogo wasn't just a footballer. He was family. Jota's chant still echoes at Anfield, but now every word feels heavier. Andrés Escobar. The 1994 World Cup was meant to be Colombia's arrival, a team tipped as dark horses carrying the hopes of a nation. But against the United States, everything unravelled. In the 35th minute, defender Andrés Escobar slid to cut out a cross. Instead, the ball deflected off his boot and into his own net. Colombia lost 2-1, crashing out in the group stage. Back home, the aftermath was poisonous. The cartels had bet heavily on Colombia's success. On July the 2nd, just 5 days after returning from the World Cup, Escobar went out in Medellin. At a nightclub, a group approached him. Words were exchanged, then shots. With each bullet, the gunman reportedly shouted, "Goal!" They said it was revenge for the own goal, but really it was Colombia's cartels, money, and a football culture poisoned by violence. Escobar, the gentleman of football, was only 27. Escobar's murder showed the darkest side of the game, when football stopped being a sport and became life or death. Miklós Fehér. It was an ordinary night in the Portuguese league. Benfica away to Vitória Guimarães. In the 67th minute, Miklós Fehér came off the bench, picked up a yellow card and answered it with a smile. That smile, brief and unguarded, would become one of football's most haunting images. Moments later, he bent forward near the halfway line and collapsed. Panic rippled through the players as medics rushed onto the pitch. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the desperation as teammates tried to shield him. On January 25, 2004, Fehér's heart stopped without warning. He was just 24 years old. The match was abandoned, but what remained was not the result, nor the booking, nor the routine details of a January fixture. It was the smile, the last smile of a life cut short. Junior Malanda. Junior Malanda was Wolfsburg's rising star. Just 20 years old, already a fixture in the Bundesliga with the Champions League on the horizon. His future seemed limitless. On January 10, 2015, that promise was cut short. Riding in the back seat of a car on the German Autobahn, Malanda wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The vehicle, travelling at high speed, lost control and crashed. He was thrown from the car and killed instantly. For Wolfsburg, for Belgium, for football, the shock was immense. A midfielder known for his energy, drive and fearlessness had been lost not to the game but to the dangers beyond it. On the pitch, Malanda's pace thrilled the Bundesliga. Off it, speed claimed his life. He was only 20. Dani Jarque. Dani Jarque was the heartbeat of Espanyol. Their captain, at just 26, a leader destined for more. In August 2009, while on pre-season in Florence, he was found lifeless in his hotel room. Heart failure had taken him in silence. What kept his memory alive came a year later. In the 2010 World Cup final, Andrés Iniesta scored the goal that gave Spain their first ever world title. As the world watched, he lifted his shirt to reveal the words, Dani Jarque, siempre con nosotros. Dani Jarque, always with us. Jarque never played at a World Cup. He never lifted the game's ultimate prize. But on that night in Johannesburg, Spain carried him there. When they touched glory, they made sure he was part of it too. 10 players, 10 tragedies, 10 reminders that football, for all its beauty, exists in a world where dreams can be shattered in an instant. They live on in memory, in retired shirts, in the knowledge that sometimes the most important victories happen away from any scoreboard.